We've le-
This meeting is being recorded.
we've gone so far, huh? 42? Wow.
We are making good progress, and 42 is an awesome chapter. I just last week I already gave a full overview. Thank you very much. I gave a full overview of where we're up to in Tanya. So this week we're going to jump right into the text. I'll just start with a story. I was just thinking of this yesterday. So much is the idea of Yerushalayim, which is what we're learning about now, the Kabbalah soul, accepting God's authority and having that reverence and respect and awe, fear of God is a crucial element that doesn't get spoken about enough, because obviously love has to be there to balance it out. And in chapter 43, we're going to learn a lot about love. But just one story that comes to mind, just as we segue into the chapter, is a story of the founder of Chabad Hasidus, who's the author of our Tanya, Reb Shneir Zalman of Liad, who's known as the Alter Rebbe. You've heard me quote him, not quote him, we were studying his book, so you heard his name a lot. The Alter Rebbe, he, at a time when he had to educate, he had to start educating his child, who ended up becoming the Chabad Rebbe after him. So this was in the 1770s. His son was born in 1772. And when it came time for him to start educating his child, he went over to a teacher. And he says, in those days, there wasn't like proper schools. There wasn't like school systems for Jewish kids the way it has it now. So he went over to someone and he says, I have a mitzvah to educate my child, to teach my child. It's like we say in the Shema, V'shinantam levanecha, that you shall teach the Torah to your child. You have the mitzvah to support your family. Let's swap. I'll help you with your mitzvah, which means I'll pay and support your family. And you'll help with my mitzvah, you'll teach my child. So the teacher, who was brilliant, who was obviously a person fit for the job, he answers back, I don't know what to teach. I don't know how to teach. So the Alter Rebbe says, you start with teaching Aleph Beis. So the teacher responds, I don't know what Aleph is, which is a brilliant response, because you obviously want to get any possible teaching or information from the Rebbe. So the beautiful teaching that the Alter Rebbe gave him at that time is you start with Aleph. What's Aleph? Because the teacher said, I don't know what an Aleph is. So the Alter Rebbe responds, an Aleph has 3 points to it. If you could envision what the letter Aleph looks like, there's a piece to the top of it, a piece at the bottom, and then there's a line in between the two of them, right? Is everyone familiar with the image of the Aleph? So the Alter Rebbe explains to him, what is an Aleph? And I'll say it in Yiddish, which is the term the Alter Rebbe used, and the Rebbe quoted the story several times, and then I'll obviously translate it in English. The Alter Rebbe would speak with a little bit of a tune, a melody to his song. And the Alter Rebbe says, was is an Aleph? A pintelef and Eibin, a pintelef and unten, and a kaf in Yer Shemayim Bemza, das is an Aleph. The Alter Rebbe says, what is an Aleph? An Aleph has a point at the top, which is representing God at the top of the universe. It has a pintele, it has a point, or the Jew at the bottom, which is representing the Jew. And then you have a line that connects the two, that connects God and the Jew. What is that line in between that connects us? That's Yirah Shamayim. Fear of heaven, that's the connector between God and us. How do we connect with God? Through Yirah Shamayim. It says in the good books in Talmud, it says in Tractate Tainus, the first page, it says that everything is in the hands of heaven. The key that was given over to us and is not in the hands of heaven is Yirah Shamayim. Fear of heaven, that is not dependent on what you were, gifts you were, talents or potentials that you were given at birth. That has to do with you, what you're doing with your day, with your life, how you revere, how you have Yirah Shamayim. That's up to us. So in our chapters 41 and now really 42, we're going into this whole theme of Yirah Shamayim, and it's a good way to acknowledge and to get ourselves ready. All right, here we go. Chapter 42. I'll bring it up on the screen. On the path to reverence is the thing, and also have some books, so I will share that as well. Let's see. Hold on a second, everyone. One book. Let's see. you go. If you want, Deborah, you can use this one.
Thank you.
And we have an extra one here.
Thank
And
you.
Aviva also, you can use this one.
Thank you. I can see it.
You can see it there?
Yeah, I'm gonna
And
get
it's
my,
not
I'm gonna
straining
get
your
my,
neck too much?
I'm gonna get my readers on.
Okay. I'm
That's
just
when I
sharing
know
with
I'm
you of
old.
the extra Tanya books that I have here with our lovely in-person guests. Okay, the path to reverence.
Is our move?
We're going to be in the book. If you're looking, it's going to be on page 523. If you're looking on the Kindle, you obviously don't need to know the page because it's right there.
Yeah, the pages will be different.
Right. I'm going to make a blessing on our water that I have in front of me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah bidvaro.
Amen. And emunah comes from amen.
Yeah,
I
I think
learned
we
that from
discussed
last
that
time.
last week,
Yeah,
right?
see, I retained a little.
Awesome. On the path to reverence, just in case it's easier, Aviva, you could use that, but you could choose whichever one you prefer.
That's fatal.
Perfect. Section 1, how Moshe's soul influences yours. So I'm not going to give too much of an intro because I already gave one last week, and over here he's going to do a little bit of a job in the beginning of this chapter. In chapter 41, we touch briefly upon the Zohar's distinction between lower reverence and higher reverence. In Hebrew or in Aramaic, the term was yira tata'ah or yira ila'ah. At lower reverence, you feel the awesome presence of God, and you are eager to fulfill his will. At higher reverence, your sense of his presence is more arresting, and you are simply overwhelmed by God. That's the difference between lower and higher. Lower, you feel God's presence, and you want to make sure to do whatever he wants. Higher, you feel his presence overwhelms you. And yeah, we didn't talk too much about higher reverence in the previous chapter, and we're not going to discuss it here either. First, we need to discuss lower reverence more thoroughly and explore some additional techniques for acquiring it. So here we go. Now, based on what we have explained above in the previous chapter about lower reverence, which is a basic requirement for all mitzvah observance, like we learned about last week, right? In order for mitzvah observance to happen, the base for it has to be yira, lower reverence. For mitzvah observance, positive or negative, we'll be able to properly understand what's written in the Talmud. Here's the Talmud and its commentary on the verse. So there's a verse in Deuteronomy that says, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it. And now, O Israel, what does God, your God, ask from you? Only that you revere God, your God. So the Talmud asks on this verse that Moses seems to be saying that yira, fear, is actually not, reverence is actually not that big of a deal. So the Talmud asks, upon which the Talmud asks, is reverence such a small thing? That says, what is God asking from you already? Just to fear him. To revere God seems to be a considerable demand. How can the verse state that this is only what God wants, implying that it is something minimal? So the Talmud answers, yes, for Moses, our teacher, it's a small thing. That's the quote from Tractate Brachot of the Talmud. But now the Tanya asks, the answer doesn't seem to make sense. Since the verse stresses, what does God, your God, ask from you, not what does God ask from Moshe? So if we're talking about Moses, fine, it's a small matter. But since Moses is speaking to the Jews and it says, what is God asking from you? It is a big deal for us to have that, to revere God. So to answer this question, the Tanya draws on a Jewish mystical teaching that some of the energy of Moshe's soul can be accessed by all the souls of Israel. So this is the beauty of what Chassidus, which is what we're studying now, what it does is it blends together all parts of the Torah. So Talmud, which is the revealed dimension of the Torah, it deals with law, deals with the basics. I wouldn't say basics, it goes in depth, but it deals with the law that we need to know in order to live lives as a Jew. Chassidus, based on Kabbalah, it goes into the soul of the Torah, it goes into the depth of it, but it doesn't leave out the Talmud, it's blending it all together, which is a beautiful thing. So again, we have the verse of the Torah, we have the Talmudic understanding of the verse that is referring to Moses, but now you have the Chassidus saying that it's referring to the Moses within all of us. And we can access that soul of Moses inside of us. Rather, the explanation is that every single soul in Israel has available to it an element of the soul of Moshe, our teacher of blessed memory. We, me and you, have access to Moshe inside of us. So, many people, if I were to ask him, who would you want to meet from Jewish history? People would say King David, or people would say Moses. But what we're learning here is you've met Moses, because in your DNA of your soul, Moses exists. Your soul is comprised of Moses' soul. You could access qualities of Moshe inside of you, which is an awesome idea. So this is based on the Zohar. Tikkunei Zohar, page 112, states that Moshe's soul extends into every single generation, into every tzaddik and scholar who immerses himself in the Torah, even to the entire generation, 600,000 of them. So I just want to get the Hebrew word of that. So this quote of the Tikkunei Zohar is not quoted here. He just gives a general quote to it. And over here, the author of this translation is bringing the source here. Okay, got it. So this refers to a spark of Moshe's soul, which extends into the tzaddik or scholar when he is studying Torah to help him understand its content correctly. Its correct intent. Okay, so I just want to pause here for a second, explain one idea based on this Tikkunei Zohar. So what the Tikkunei Zohar is saying is that the access to the Moses of our souls happens through the leaders of our generation. In every generation, there's a leader. That leader has leadership qualities that was bequeathed to him from Moses. So there's Moses that is existing in every generation. It's obviously the same soul, but a different person, right? It's Moses of our generation. So the Talmud's quote actually is, there's a Mordechai of his generation is like Moses. But what the Tikkunei Zohar is saying is accessing that, connecting with that righteous person connects you with the leader, with Moses. So that's just a base, a source for the important Hasidic understanding that it's a mitzvah. It is our duty to connect to leaders of our generation, and the leaders, whichever generation has every generation has their leaders, and our job is, if you want to really access who you really are, you connect to the leader. The leader, that's the beauty of what a leader is, different than a rabbi. A rabbi could inspire you. A leader allows you to inspire yourself. When you look at a leader, many people say this when they saw the Rebbe, and I said this myself as a little kid. I was able to look at the Rebbe's eyes and right away see something deeper. People, when they saw the Rebbe, they said it was like a mirror into my own soul. You don't only see a great person, you saw the greatness of your own self when you saw the Rebbe. That's what a real leader does, and why it's because every leader is connecting throughout history to the original leader, which is Moshe, the great leader. But I think this is going to, over here, the reason why I just want to explain this is because from this quote, it seems that you don't access that leadership quality in yourself. You access it through the leader of your generation. But I think the point that Tanya is trying to get to, and anyone could correct me if they see it otherwise, is that you're able to access the spark of Moses inside of yourself. So let's go back inside, and we'll try and understand that together. So let's see if that makes sense.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Hey,
Does
Steve,
it
how are
make
you?
sense? I'm well, thank you. I'm going to give you a perspective that maybe you're not familiar with, but I know that Jung studied with Hasidic rabbis. And is this the concept of an archetypal? We have the Moses within us, a universal image of a leader of good that we all possess. That's the collective unconsciousness, and that we all can access through any generation. Is that possibly the same concept that Jung calls the archetypal, and we call it the soul of Moses in all of us?
I don't know enough about Jung or archetypal. I'm hearing about it for my first time to fully understand it. So I don't know if I could explain. Tell me a little more of how that works.
Jung came up with concepts for secular psychology of overriding personas. Maybe in some other people that understand Jung better than I can explain this. A universal almost avatars, images
Wow.
of people that we take on subconsciously in our personas.
I
That's
don't know.
collective.
That rubs me the wrong way. Maybe it's just the way you explained it. I mean, that could be a very good description of that archetypal relationship that discovered by Jung. But it doesn't sound like a Jewish way of. It's not that we take on their energy. It's already something that the like when you're dealing with souls. Let me tell me if this is how you would explain it also in modern terms. But when a soul is not limited to that person. The soul could be like Adam, a fragment of a soul we each possess.
I believe,
Moses,
I
so
believe,
it's not
I
that we
believe.
take on Moses. We don't become Moses, God forbid.
No, no, no.
But
I
we
believe.
act as Moses.
I believe the notion of a collective unconsciousness is the
That's the
notion
term,
that it's all. It's kind of what we would call God almost.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's you could see how Jung got his thinking by studying Hasidism and then changed the concepts to make it a secular thought.
Mm.
But this, I believe, is the origin of his brilliance that is never credited to Hasidism. But I think he actually credited Dovbe as being anticipating his philosophy by 150 years, I believe he said at his 80th birthday party in response to a question. So I just find it interesting.
When this was the
He
19th
was a,
century.
yeah, he was a student of Freud. So
Century. Cool. Wow.
40?
The collective unconsciousness makes me think of the transcendentalists, from the 19th century, like
true, but
Emerson and Thoreau and Whitman.
that was nature oriented. But I
The
believe
oversoul.
he lifted the concept initially from Hasidism. He didn't like the religious connotations, so he changed it to be nature driven, not God driven.
Sort of like Plato, with his, I don't know if he called them archetypes. I can't remember. It was the true form of everything
The
lived
original form.
on a different level,
Yeah, so I don't know. Those things rub me the wrong way when we're studying Tanya. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to limit ourselves to take on a lens that is secular or whatever.
No. I only meant it to explain for people who love Jews love Jung, and I encourage them to go back to Hasidism and understand where Jung got the concept from. It's a much deeper thought than what Jung did with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can I ask
Sure.
sort of somewhat? I love the idea that we're all part of this, and it kind of gives us all that potential of being leaders in our own way. And for me, of course, low self-esteem, or you might even call low self-esteem ego, a piece of ego, a different manifestation of ego. That you, as a person in this world, I always sometimes compare myself, and I feel very small compared to what a leader is and what a leader takes on, and and it definitely challenges me.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. And the beautiful quote of the Talmud that in especially when we're learning Tanya, the idea of bittul, humility, humbleness, and the negation of ego is so crucial. But also at the same time, in other chapters of Tanya, it says you possess a spark of the divine that makes you the most important person in the world. Like you have to have this balance of knowing when humility is necessary from you, the abnegation of your ego, and when the tapping into and unleashing the infinite soul that God bequeathed inside of you, when that is. And like where I quoted from the Talmud, there's a beautiful quote that says, "B'shvili nivra ha'olam," which means the world was created for me. The whole world is for me. It's a famous quote from the Tractate Sanhedrin, page 90. But in other places, it says, I'm nothing but earth, or like we say in the Amida, v'nashi ka'afar lakol tiyeh. And I should be like dirt in front of everything. Let people walk on me. Shemata. So when to know, so you should have both cards, one in your right pocket, one in your left pocket, and knowing when you are too high on your horse, you have to look at yourself as a nothing. And when you're too low, you have to look at yourself as the most important. Right now, it was started 2 weeks ago. For those that were here on Lag BaOmer, I concluded the study of the Rambam, and I'm studying it again. And there's this the Rambam is now going into personality traits. And one of the beautiful things of the Rambam, especially when it comes to this, it says too much of anything is not good. Even charity, you shouldn't give all your money away to charity. You shouldn't be overly generous, but you shouldn't be overly stingy. So there are times when a person is too stingy and they need to break that habit, then they should go to the other extreme and be overly generous. But then eventually wean themselves to the middle, because the center road is the ideal. And the same is also, you shouldn't be the Rambam goes through many examples. But anyway, the point I want to get back to the point of the Tanya here. But the point is that even with humility is something that is the core of who we are as Jewish people. You should just not allow yourself to be stepped on, but arrogance has to be pushed away to the extreme, which means that's one of the things that there's not a middle. They should have an ego and then also bittul. They should have no ego at all. But when you're feeling that you're a nobody, you have to know how to pull out the card and saying, I'm important. One of the beautiful teachings from a chassid, so many times we share stories of the Rebbes, but many times the Rebbes wanted to share stories of chassidim because it almost seems to be more within reach for us to be able to live up to that. And a story of a chassid who, through his fighting of arrogance, he was able to be a better Jew, because he had an arrogance. He felt very proud of who he is, but because of that pride, even though it's something that should be negated to the utmost, but that saved him in situations where he was a business person in Moscow, and he had many temptations that came his way that other Jews at the time that were living in shtetls didn't come across. They didn't have the worries and challenges and tests that he had living in the business world in downtown Moscow, that many Jews were not allowed to live in. And whenever he would be confronted with this temptation, he would tell himself, me? You know, I should fall to such a low level. Do you know who I am? I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. I studied so much Talmud. I'm going to fall for this little temptation. So through his arrogance, it was almost like a holy arrogance. It saved him from falling in the pitfalls. And I recommend this to anyone. A person, so many times we fall into a trap where we tell ourselves it's not important, no one's looking, no one cares what I do anyway. But every now and then you should really tell yourself, like, this is so unbecoming of me. Like, how could I stoop so low? I'm better than that. And it's even just a little conversation to yourself. When you lose yourself in anger or something else, you should be able to hold yourself back by saying, I could expect more out of myself. I'm better than that. Come on, like, I could do better. It's almost like a little conversation you could have with yourself. Anyway, I wanted to make sure we continue inside, not to lose track. But
Rabbi,
yeah.
I had one little question about the scripture, Deuteronomy 10:12.
Yep.
It seems like first that God is speaking to Moses, and then in 12 it says, I see it that he's now speaking to all of Israel. It says, because first he tells Moses to rise, and then in 12 he says, and now Israel, what does the Lord require of you but to fear God and walk in his ways, to love him and to serve God with all your heart and soul, and to keep his commandments of the Lord and his statutes.
What verse? Yeah, so what verse, Lynn, were you saying that it seems like it's God speaking to Moses?
In 11, because the Lord said to me, and he's talking about how he was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah.
And so the Lord said to me, arise in your journey before the people. So now the people and Moses are separate, that they may go and possess the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. And then it seems like then he's turning and talking to all of collective Israel, so that they all have that higher responsibility. So maybe it's the mind of Moses, but I see also it's the mind of God.
Well, it's interesting because the entire book of Deuteronomy, Lynn, the entire book of Devarim is Moses speaking to the Jewish people, right? Every verse, instead of it saying, and God spoke to Moses saying, you don't see that once in the verse of in a verse in Deuteronomy, which is so common in the rest of the Torah. Over here, you see God spoke to me saying, right? Right? The whole Deuteronomy. So over here, even when Moses is saying, and God, told me to arise, but then for sure in this verse that we have quoted on the screen, for sure it's Moses speaking to the Jewish people, right?
Right.
Now, O Israel, right? It's pretty clear.
Yeah. But isn't it still the mind of God is what he's saying? Like as a prophet, you don't say your own words or you're dead. You can only
Yeah.
speak the words of God.
Yeah, it's true, for sure. But throughout the whole Deuteronomy, the whole Devarim, it's
Yes.
clear that Moses is, starting with
Speaking.
rebuking the Jewish people and then inspiring them, empowering them in keeping Torah. I'm pretty sure it's clear that it's Moses speaking to the Jews, saying that you should be having this year for God. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Marsha. You're muted. I'll have to unmute.
Oh, are you,
Marsha, are you trying to add something?
Yes, I'm trying to find out what page we're on in the print book, please.
Yep, no problem. I'm actually shared my book with Aviva, so we're
523.
on 523.
523.
524.
524, yeah.
We're already on 524. 524. Okay. Okay, so we're at the second paragraph from the top. Here we go. To revere God. No, we said that. Hold on, let's go back further, one more page. Here we go. So that's a quote from the Tikkun Zohar, that when we connect our scholars, is connecting to Moses. Reb Chaim Vital expands this idea, beyond the context of Torah scholars to all souls. That's what I wanted to get to, that the Tikkun Zohar, which is from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai from 2,000 years ago, he says that we have to connect our scholars, and that connects us to Moses. But from Rabbi Isaac Luria and his famed disciple, Reb Chaim Vital, from the 1500s, when they authored the book under the Arizal, he expands the idea to be speaking about every single Jewish soul is connected to Moshe, which are included in Moshe, since it is from his soul that they are derived. They are all sparks from him. That's the beautiful quote, and that's how we get to this idea in the Tanya. The Tanya will argue in this chapter that the Talmud statement that reverence was a small thing for Moshe, our teacher, was referring to the spark of Moshe's soul within your soul. So let's just summarize the idea, just to make sure we're back on track. We have a verse that says, Moses speaking to the Jewish people, saying, what is God asking from you just to revere him? The Talmud saying that's heavy duty stuff, it's not simple. And the Talmud answers, for Moshe, it's simple. It's a small thing. And the way that Tanya is explaining it, the verse is not talking to Moshe, it's talking to the Jew. So how is it still answering that it's a simple thing for Moshe? He's saying it's referring to the Moshe inside of me and you. And this is based on the Reb Chaim Vital, based on the Eitz Chaim, which means the tree of life, the books of the Rabbi Isaac Luria, the book of the Arizal. Okay. First, Tanya cites a further source for the connection between Moshe's soul and the souls of Israel, based on the Talmud and Zohar. So I quoted this briefly in our intro last week. For according to the Talmud, Moshe is one of the 7 shepherds of the Jewish people. And I wasn't sure all 7, and here is actually going to quote it for us, which is really nice. The 7 shepherds in Hebrew is the Shiva Roim. Who are the 7 shepherds and what is their function? The Zohar teaches that corresponding to the 7 divine emotional attributes, God created on earth truly worthy men to sustain the attributes and to illuminate them on earth. And they are the fathers of the world: Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, Moshe, Aaron, and David. This is an addendum to Zohar for different views on the identity of the 7 shepherds, and see the discussion there. So, you know what? Is anyone familiar with this idea? I've quoted this before. Some of you were and some of you were not. In our sukkah, there's 7 guests that come to our sukkah. They're called the 7 ushpizim, which is an Aramaic word for guests. Familiar with that, Deborah?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a Hebrew, right? Do you say ushpiz?
Ushpizim.
But you don't say that in Hebrew, right? You don't
No.
refer
Is
to
it a
it.
Yiddish
No.
word?
It's Aramaic, actually.
Oh, a maid.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it seems like the 7 guests, if you remember who the 7 ushpizin are in our sukkah, it's actually the same as the 7 shepherds, right? There's a little debate on a few of them. Like some people include Solomon in there. But according to this message, this paragraph, it's not. These are the 7, which is really nice. So in the Tanya's words, what is the function of these 7 shepherds? The 7 shepherds cause energy and godliness to flow to the souls of all Israel, which is why they are called shepherds, who tend to their flock and feed them with spiritual powers. So that's what a shepherd does with their flock. And that's what the Jewish shepherds do to the Jewish people. They take godly energy and they channel it. They cause this energy to flow to the Jew. According to the Kabbalah, these 7 shepherds are responsible for shepherding and nourishing the light of God's emotional attributes into Malchus, which is the lowest of God's sephiras. And since Malchus, or Shekhinah, is the source of Jewish souls, as we learned in chapter 41, the 7 shepherds nourish us directly, strengthening our ability to have love and reverence for God. So if you didn't understand every part of that, it's okay. It was based, some of it was based on a previous chapter. But we know there's the Shekhinah of God. The Shekhinah literally means God's divine presence. And the Shekhinah of God is the lowest level of godliness that is communicated to this world. So you have higher parts of godly energy that is not lowering itself into this world. The Shekhinah is on the divine attribute of Malchus, which is the lowest emanation of godly energy. And that is coming to the world. So for example, some of you are familiar, depending where you've davened, but if you go to Chabad to daven, we have what's known as the priestly blessing, right? I'm pretty sure they don't do this in Reform or Conservative. Barbara, do you have Birkat Kohanim by a Kohen?
We do it definitely.
Oh, but
Definitely.
it's not the Kohen that does it.
Yeah, the priestly blessings.
Oh, got it. Okay.
It was
And
done at a Reform Bas Mitzvah. I just attended.
No, but I know the words are said because it's a verse in the Torah, but is it the Kohen that gives it?
Oh, no.
The rabbi gives
In
it.
this case,
Right. I've been told that the Kohanim don't because it's not like an egalitarian thing. Like for us, we give honor to the Kohen. They get an aliyah first. It's a halacha. They get an aliyah first. We give them the honor to bench, to lead the blessing of the Birkat HaMazon. And also, literally, Birkat Kohanim means the priestly blessing. So it's the Kohen tribe that will give the blessing. So whatever, when the Kohen gives the priestly blessing, their hands are supposed to be shaped in a certain way. The talus is supposed to be draped over them and over us. And it says that there's a Shekhinah that resides in the room at the time. And that's why we don't look directly at the Kohen. There's a lot of laws involved in the priestly blessing, in the Birkat Kohanim. But the point that we're trying to say is, what are we tapping into at that point? This is Shekhinah, which is the attribute of God, the way it comes into Malchus. The 7 shepherds, their job is to shepherd godly energy into Malchus, into Shekhinah. And by doing that, where is the source of our souls? In the Shekhinah. So God, the shepherds are shepherding or nourishing godly energy into the souls of all Israel. I hope that makes sense.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I always think about the Shekhinah as, like the neighbor that's close.
Shochen, right? It's
And
from
so,
the same word.
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, it's the lowest emanation, but it's, on the other hand, I feel like it's, even though it's the lowest emanation, it's the closest to us. And that's what makes it so special.
So it's part of it, very, very good. It's something, it's whatever's more relatable, you can obviously appreciate more. It's more something that you can tap into, but it's actually brought and it's going into deeper Kabbalah. And I learned Kabbalah and deeper parts of Hasidus with other people. But the general idea is whatever is able to reach lower actually means that it comes from a higher source.
Well, that's a good.
So, for example, a teacher can have a brilliant person that's a horrible teacher, because even though he's a genius, he can't relate to explain things for a 6-year-old to understand. But someone that is able to relate things is because he has an extra gift of brilliance that is able to take deep ideas and explain it in simple matter. So the source of where he's coming from is actually higher, therefore he's able to reach lower. In basic Hebrew, it's referred to in the Torah as kol gavoa beyoter, yored lamata mata beyoter. Whatever is higher is able to reach lower. The same is with a tree. The higher the fruit of the tree, the farther away it's able to reach. The farther away it falls. right? Everyone understands that, right? Whatever's higher falls further or lower. Same with gravity. So, but the point for here is Malchus, which, as we were just discussing and Deborah just mentioned, is from what's able to be more relatable. Because it's more relatable, shows that the true DNA of Malchus is actually from a higher source than the rest of the Sephiros. And actually Malchus, which is this Sephira, this emotional attribute that we're talking about, literally means royalty or kingship, right? The Melech is from the word Malchus. What is the king famous for? For having a crown. If he doesn't have a crown, he's not a king or a queen. To the point where it says that the kingdom of Israel, how did they know that the person was fit to be the king? It says that the crown would mold to his head. It was a perfect fit. There were some kings that were 12 when they became king, like Solomon. There was even a famous king that was 7 when he became king. Anyone know who that is? All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Josiah.
Very
Josiah.
good. Yeah,
Wow.
awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, I forgot how to say his name in Hebrew, but yeah. Hosea, I think is
Yoshua?
no, not Joshua, it's Hosea. Very good. He was 7. His evil grandmother wanted to kill him, and they had to hide him in the holy temple, and they waited till he was 7. Crazy story, but God willing, guys, we have to really start a class on Tanakh, on the actual study of basics. You would love it, but some of it is pretty crazy. Like, I'm not crazy, it's Torah, but it's the stories are quite gruesome. But yeah, definitely it's a temptation of mine to actually start a class on Tanakh, to go through basic prophets and chronicles, go through all of that. Okay, good to know. Anyway, the point, so the crown would mold to their head. It even says, how do they know that someone was fit to be a king? There was like a certain bump on the head. Steve, let me look at your head. I think you had one of those bumps. See, it's worth it to have your video on. That way I could inspect
You can
everyone's.
see if he's
Thank you. It's covered.
Worthy of being the king. All right. But what's the uniqueness of a king? That they have a crown. The crown is above their head. So the beauty of a king is that what Malchus is really, it's below everything. Its root is actually from the crown, which is above everything, above the heart, above the head, which is the place of our emotions, a place higher than our intellect, which is our Chachma Bina Das, comes along the king, and it's even higher than all of that, because that's the source of Malchus, which is above. It says actually, Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila. It says that the crown of the husband is actually his wife, because she's rooted from a higher source. Which is an amazing idea. There's a lot to talk about on it. It says when Mashiach comes, she will have the absolute dominance. Like right now, the way under the chuppah, he recites a prayer betrothing his wife. It says when Mashiach comes, she will recite the prayer to betroth her husband, because the root of so actually, just a little more. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little carried away. The woman represents Malchus, which is what Shabbat is about, right? Shabbos is the Shekhinah of God, and I think I mentioned this a few classes ago. The Shekhinah of God is dominant on Shabbat. That's why most of our prayers of Shabbat is relating to God and the feminine, because the Shekhinah is the feminine side of God that is prevalent on Shabbos. So therefore, when Mashiach comes, which will be a day, every day will be Shabbos. That's where the right now. So Shabbos is the woman has the feminine energy of the world is dominant on Shabbos. But when Mashiach comes, every day will have that uniqueness of Shabbos, where it will rise to its source, and every day that uniqueness to the woman will be very revealed in the world. It will be much more brought out.
If every day is going to be Shabbos, that means no malaka. You can't garden, you can't water.
No, I think we can. It's more in the spiritual sense,
Spiritual,
the godliness of the world.
How would the world continue? How would everything
No,
get
All right,
Serious,
all right. Here we go.
That's a good question.
Okay, but why? We're in the middle of the page in the Kindle, but why then? do we only need a spark from Moshe's soul in order to worship God properly? Wouldn't we need a spark from all 7 shepherds? That's a good question. If all 7 shepherds nourish us, why are we saying that it's Moshe that we get our spark from? So the Tanya explains that while each of the shepherds can nourish a particular attribute in our souls, Moshe, our teacher of blessed memory, combines them all, nourishing all the attributes, including reverence of God. And that is why throughout the Zohar, he is called the faithful shepherd, or in Hebrew or in Aramaic, Raya Mehemna, being the archetypal shepherd who fulfills the function of them all. That's from the Jerusalem Talmud. So that's Moshe's incredible role. And that's why we tap into the Moshe inside of us particularly. Why is Moshe able to nourish our souls with all the emotional attributes, in contrast to the other shepherds who are limited to our particular attribute? So what is unique about Moshe? Let's dig in. The Tanya explains, and if you remember this from last week, this is where the Tanya will get into the concept of das, knowledge, or what we translated it last week more as focus. That's what Moshe had, the power of das. And let's see that inside. That's where I brought it in last week in our intro, but let's see it inside. That's because Moshe causes das to flow to all the souls of Israel. Moshe's role was to bring das, to nourish das into all of Israel. Let's see what that means. As we have learned on page 62, this was from chapter 3, the transition from thinking to feeling, from chachma and bina, which was our thinking capability, to our feeling in our heart. So again, to get from the mind to the heart, takes place via the energy of das, recognition, a process through which ideas become personally relevant. By nourishing our das, Moshe's soul influences the entire range of our emotions, enabling us to worship God. So again, Moshe is synonymous with das. Das, what does Moshe nourish into us? To take ideas and make them personally relevant. So Moshe's influence is on the entire range of our emotions, meaning from the mind to get it into the heart. And that das allows it to go through all of our feelings of our heart, our emotions, and that allows us to worship God. So again, a person certainly can worship God in their mind, but it's not real worship. To worship God, which is the theme of these chapters, it has to be into the heart. In 2 words, what is the feeling of the heart? Ava and Yira, loving God, fearing God. Where is that fear of God, that reverence of God, and that love of God going to come from? From the Moshe inside of us. Because the Moshe is the bridge to get from the mind to the heart. The Moshe is the das to make ideas personally relevant. And this, back in the Tanya, this enables each individual to have das of God. So again, that's Moshe, and Moshe's nourishing it to each and every one of us, that we can have this das, or this personal experience of worship of God. This is the theme of this chapter, that it's Moshe. So this answers the question, why is it Moshe particular over the other shepherds? Because Moshe's role is das. Das influences all of our feelings. But the extent to which you succeed in acquiring das depends on 3 factors. So now we know we have the ability, but how are we able to be successful? Number 1, or A, it would be according to your soul's own cognitive abilities. And B, it depends on your soul's root above. And C, it also depends on the level from which your soul can draw energy from the root of Moshe's soul. The more you could draw from Moshe, the more das, the more feeling you can have. So, let me pause here for a second. We are born with the ability to worship God with love and fear. It's something innate to be able, because God gave us das. God gave us chachma. God gave us bina. God gave us das. In English, that means God gave us the ability to inquire on an idea, like to be curious, be open-minded and creative. God gave us the idea to have a cognitive ability to understand, to analyze, and that God gave us the ability to recognize. It's something we are born with, right? Going back to chapter 3, there's 10 of these 10 spheres that God created the world with, and God imbued in each and every one of us, the soul powers of our soul. but the extent to how we process it, meaning we have it, but it's a workout in order to be able to tap into it. And this is the chapter's theme of how can we tap into it. So it depends on the root of our soul, to how deep of a level we're able to reach into it, and also how much we could access from Moshe's soul. So let's see that inside. Obviously, the das of Moshe's soul doesn't replace the das in your soul. It merely enhances whatever is there already. So even with this assistance, you're still limited by your soul's powers, both in terms of nurture, which is how well your soul has matured intellectually, and nature, which is your soul's spiritual root to its level of access to Moshe's soul. So I love this idea. There's nurture, there's nature, you have the das, but you also have to tap into Moshe in order to be able to enhance it. And that depends on the nature that we have. Yes, Lynn?
Let's see, how do I get, am I muted? Let's see.
I know, we hear you. We hear you.
Okay. So my question is I know people who get up in the middle in the day and can get 10 times more done than other people. And it's not that they're different, but they're focused. And I've just always been surprised within a 24-hour period. There's some people that are incredible, high effective performers and focused and starting business, everything that they do seems to succeed and they seem to have this focus. And other people, well, they get up, they eat breakfast, they do their work, and they watch television. And so it's just always surprised me how we can be one of these people that's a high effective performer, is the words I would use. And it sounds like we're tapping into something. And I was just wondering if you had some thoughts on this.
I love it. You know what? I was just thinking of a similar idea. And Deborah, do you mind bringing that water to the table?
No, I do not.
Share that with you.
It's partially opened, just so you know.
Thank you. So I have this cute thing. I realize every year when Shabbos comes around in the winter, it's earlier. It could be as early as 4:30. In the summer, it could get as late as like 8:20. Like the end of June is like the latest day, the longest days of the year. Shabbat starts the latest. What I realize is no matter winter or summer, it's always a rush before Shabbos. Like I know for me, I write an email every Shabbos. I take time to write it up. In the winter, I get the email done by 2:00. In the summer, I can't get the email done before 6:00. There's the same 24 hours, but somehow everyone has different personality, but everyone has that high, I can't say everyone, some people have disabilities, but everyone can perform to a high level. But we usually, many people have a personality to procrastinate or to kick into high gear, like cramming before a test in college to the last minute. But really, we have the ability to do it earlier. Like the people at the beginning of time that lived to 900 years. Did I share this in this class? I lose track of where. No? Okay. Sorry if I did, or if I didn't, I'll share it now. That people at the beginning of time, maybe I shared it on Shabbos. People at the beginning of time lived to 900 years. Why did God commute that to 120 years? Right at the end of the first parasha, book of Genesis, Parashat Bereshis, God says the days of man will be 120 years. One explanation is that 120 years will bring the flood, but another one is God sentenced the lifespan of man, of humanity, to be 120 years instead of the 950. Why? Because people that had so much time in their lives wasted the first 700 years. And then they're like, okay, what should I do to be productive? But they knew they have 900 years to live. They almost wasted 500 of them and said, okay, maybe now I should get a job. And they're 700 years old and they're thinking about what should they do with themselves. So when God commuted the sentence to be shorter, 90 years, 120 years, the value of time was a lot more. I'm just speaking now on that's from commentaries of the Torah, but on my own, thank God the longevity of people is growing. Thank God, right? Many of us have grandparents that died younger, and but thank God now people are. We just lost someone in the community. She was 93. Like we just did a shiva, if you remember on Shabbos, Ruvain, his mom just died. She was 93. And you thank God, and God willing, it should continue, and we should all live forever with the coming of Mashiach. But what I see as a result of that is people are growing up later. Like you know, the average teenage year goes now probably until 25. They're still living with their parents and playing video games, and it takes them longer to grow up. I don't know if it's related that the lifespan of man is growing, and therefore they're
It's part of the economics too.
I'm not sure, but Lynn, I'm getting a little off topic of what you were saying, but can you remind me your questions? How did I get to this?
It's easy to get off topic.
So my question is, there's some people that are high effective performers that get so much done in a day. They seem focused. Time is valuable, but they seem to deepen the ability to get things done. And many of them are Jewish, as it turns out, people I know. And I can't even tell my friends how much I do in a day, or they get mad at me. But there's a capacity that I think that I want to tap into even more. So I think you're onto something that I'm very, very intrigued and interested in, because maybe because my days are short, I'm counting my days, but I believe that we really, at the end of my days, I want to give my life or soul back to God and just say, hopefully, and every day I say, did I do your will today? Did I do everything you asked me to do? Am I building the kingdom? Am I serving you in a way that honors you? And I want to be able to do that at the end of my life, that he would say, well done.
That's beautiful.
So,
and based on what we're learning in this chapter, I'd like to answer that question, Lynn. It's a really good question. And the key, I think, at least using the gateway of this chapter to answer it, is the high functionality ability that we have is through Das. Das is taking what we know to apply it into action, whether through our feelings or in our behavior. But Das is going to be that bridge to take. People can be geniuses, but don't get things done because they're not applying what they know into action. Or people could preach the importance of morality, but they could be disgusting bums because, again, they're not using that Das ability to take the idea. And I could go on with professors that were talking about important, lofty ideas, and then they were not the example of that idea. They weren't living up to that standard, and they said, "I'm here just to teach. I'm not here to be a role model." But in Judaism, Das is that ability to take an idea and apply it, and maybe, as you were saying, Lynn, that the function to the missing piece that people sometimes miss is to take the idea, but to apply it and to make it into practice. That's going to be through the ability of Das. But we all have Das already. The process of this chapter is to work on it, to delve on it even deeper, to elevate it to a higher level. That's going to be through the Moses of our soul. And but we each possess it, and now it's just a matter of working to reach that deeper root, to nurture and to bestow even more on it. Cool. I like that angle. Yes, Robin.
I like this idea of Moshe as being the bridge between mind and heart, and seeing him as seeing his role as Das. But I'm beginning to feel these tendrils of discomfort, because it seems like we're almost deifying Moshe. Maybe you can talk about that.
For sure. So first of all, I was going to correct you in the first sentence. The Das you already have inside of you. It's already there. But you're able to access a deeper source in your soul, meaning it's something you already have. But Moshe, there are 7 shepherds. Each one was nurturing a different emotion that we have. Moshe's emotion, or Moshe's soul power, I should say, was the ability of Das. Now, it's something we have, and it's not even going back in history and trying to communicate with Moses. It's the Moses that we have inside of each and every one of us have the spark of Moses, which may seem. Let me just put it in simple terms. Any one of the Jewish people that want to take on a leadership quality, we look at Moses of how to be a leader. Number one, the quality, what was Moshe's famous quality, is humility. It says Moshe was the most humble person on the face of the earth. That's Moses, who was the greatest person, but he was also the most humble. So if you want to be a leader, You start with that quality of humility. But the beauty is, Robin, that it's not being a leader of a community or being a leader of a nation. That's not what being a leader is. Being a leader over your family. Be a leader, guide them, mentor them. Be a leader over your own behavior. Control it, nurture it, inspire it. Your way you speak, the way you talk, the way you act. To do that, you're tapping into the Moses inside of you. So the leadership ability that you and I have, when we learn all these beautiful stories of Moses, and I share this, on Shabbos when we go through the story and the Torah, what was the first commandment Moses was given as a leader? What was the first thing Moses was told by God? If you want the mission statement of what it is to be a leader, look at the first thing God told
To
Moses.
take off his shoes.
Take off your shoes. Very good. Deborah. Awesome. That was the first thing. In Hebrew, the words were, and Lynn will quote this, the chapter and the verse, chapter 4 of the book of Exodus, but the verse was, Shal ne'alecha ma'al reglech, remove your shoes.
So it's about humility.
It's about being
Yirah.
sensitive to small pebbles that when you're wearing fancy shoes, you don't feel. But when you're barefoot, you feel the smallest crack of the earth. To be a leader, which is for me and you also, is to be sensitive to those around you, even if it seems petty for you. But if you remove your shoes, even those small little pebbles, if I'm not talking about rocks, but I'm talking about struggles that people are going through, you have to be sensitive to also. But again, even such a lesson, it's not going back in history to see what Moses, but it's to see inside of you the Moses you have inside of you. And that's something incredible, to realize that the power of my soul has an incredible potential, and including to be a leader. And it's not something that you have to look outside of you to have. It's something you already have, and you just have to uncover. You just have to unleash. That's the Moses inside of you. Anyway, yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Very
We're
good.
going over time, and I just want, as Shira was bringing me the book, we were talking about Malchus, which is all about how do we translate Malchus here? I was translating as
Queenship.
as royalty, but over here is translating as nobility. But anyway, this entire week of Sphere, which is the last week, the 7th week, it deals with the 7th emotion, which is Malchus. And today we are in Netzach of Malchus, which is a person's dignity and a leader's success is tested by his endurance level. So endurance in nobility. Will and determination reflect the power and majesty of the human spirit, the strength of one's sovereignty. Anyway, there's more to talk about in today's daily Omer count, but I'm already over time. I apologize for that. All right, everyone. Just a reminder of the schedule. Shavuot is on Sunday, so get ready to be receiving the Torah. We do it right here. We're going to be reading the 10 Commandments. Service will start at 10:15 on Sunday, June 5th. Reading of the Torah is at around 11:15. Reading the 10 Commandments will be just around 11:30, maybe 11:40. But it's important to be here as we renew our vows with God for the 3,334th time as we receive the Torah.
Is it okay to listen to the 10 Commandments to fulfill our duty on the second day of
You're saying the second day instead of the first day?
Yeah. I'm going to a